Hi everyone, this is the Wild Rift Patch Notes 1.1 analysis or rundown. I already did the live stream for this, and this is just going to be sort of a re-upload or redo for people watching on YouTube or people that didn't watch the live stream, right? Um, I'll just be doing more videos or longer content for things that require more in-depth explanation, right? So moving on, we see that there are three new champions. There's Draven, Darius, and Wukong. I think right off the bat, I would say that Wukong would definitely be the most successful out of the three. I also feel that Draven and Darius face the same issues that champions like Olaf and Tryndamere have, where because of the lanes being so short in Wild Rift, it becomes very hard for them to, find opportunities to really play on their advantage. Where Darius needs to stack up his bleed, right? Draven should be trying to chase down people with axes and just use the power advantage that these two champions have. But because it's really hard for them to get into that state against players that know how to control the wave and know how to play against such champions, right? So I think they will still be really strong at the lower ranks, but it definitely would fall down like as Olaf does, right? Where he's seems as really OP, but once you reach like maybe Emerald, Diamond, Master, Challenger, Olaf just doesn't do anything anymore, right? Wukong on the other hand seems like a really strong team fighting bruiser as he is in League PC. It's just that I don't know how he would do into champions like Malphite and Gragas because historically in League PC he isn't good into those champions, right? And these are champions that are very prominent in the current meta. Although, if you talk about competitive, there's a high chance that one of these two champions are banned, and we might see a bit of trading back and forth between champion like Wukong and other top laners. Right, so there's additional languages because they're expanding the game to new regions and features. I really like that we can see that Riot is implementing stuff that the community wants. Right, we see that there's new ping ability cooldowns, right, fixed joystick controls, which are all things that people in the community have been voicing about their concern. Right, and it's really nice to see Riot really listen to what we want and implement it so soon. Skins. So skins wise, Academy Darius is shit. Okay, High Noon Darius is the Darius skin that you should be looking for. Soul Reaver Draven is probably the better out of the two. Even though you have like lesser effects, but it's just a way cooler skin, right? So if you are getting two, get these two, right? High Noon Darius and Soul Reaver Draven. Now champions. We are standardizing the cost of ultimates and nerfing mana regen for around half the roster. These changes are shown in the section below this one. More significant changes are still here. So Alistar, we are making a slight tweak to his second skill Headbutts timing to promote more variety in Alistar's PV plays. Cooldown 13, 12, 11, 10 to 14, 12.5, 11, 9.5. So honestly there isn't much to be said here because I really feel that the 1 second nerf at early rank into the zero point 0.5 buff later on does not make a difference. Like it really doesn't make a difference at all because the way that Alistar's second skill is basically is that it's a 1 or 2 seconds behind his first skill. So this maybe just syncs it up, but other than that, irrelevant change, right? Gragas. Gragas out is much harder to land in Wild Rift, and it's a huge part of his playmaking potential. We are making it a bit faster so he can start the party a bit sooner. Um, I'm not sure why they're deciding to buff Gragas in this case because if you ask any high ranking player, right, what are the best champions in the game, most of them, or basically all of them, would say, right, Gragas, Lee Sin, Jhin, right, best three champions in the game at the moment. And Gragas is by far one like probably the best champion in the game at the moment because it can be played top lane, mid lane, support, and the amount of damage and tankiness it brings is just ridiculous, right? So I find it very weird that they're buffing him, but I think it's whatever, right? Especially the fact that they're touching the frames of his ultimate. They're removing a layer of counterplay that people sort of had, right? Because now you need a lot faster reaction time, or you need to be dashing a lot faster for you to be able to escape his cast range. So it's a bit odd that they will touch this specific area to buff Gragas. Janna. Janna has slowly fallen off when her core fantasy should be intact as a highly mobile poke and protect champion. We are putting the wind back in her sails by buffing her second and third skill. So my opinion of Jaina is that even before this buff, she was already in a very good position. It's just that nobody played her because they dislike her playstyle. Right? She seems like a very skillless champion with not a lot of mechanics involved, which is why people in general they just they just think this champion is shit, right? Because it just seems like a weaker Sona. But in fact, this champion is one of the strongest at the moment, right? Because I feel that she has, first of all, really good matchup into Alistar, right? And can do decently into Blitzcrank, although that might be a bit risky. And it's really nice to see that they are touching on her offensive stats, because even Riot says, right, highly mobile poke champion, and that's what she is, right? She can easily abuse the enemy bot lane in the early game. So seeing how buff attack damage 46 to 52, Zephyr 55, 115, 175, 235 to 65, 125, 185, and 245. It's just a 10 damage buff with a little bit of AP scaling. It's not going to be huge, but it's good to see that they are promoting more variety in the support champion pool, right? Because if you are looking at the top support players in the ranks, all you see is just Blitzcrank Alistar, Blitzcrank Alistar, Blitzcrank Alistar, and maybe like a rare Braum game. But outside of those three champions, it's nothing, right? And I think Jaina is that champion that you would play into those champions, because you have a lot of disengage against Alistar, right? You do have a lot of mobility and help to wave clear against Blitzcrank, so it's less risky than something like if you were to play Seraphine, for example. Eye of the Storm, base shield 80 to 230 to 90 to 240. Again, this is just a low change with the lower cooldown as well. These are all buffs for her early game, which I really appreciate. Shyvana has been more dragon than human with the way her fireballs have been hurting. Here's some math to cool her off. Right, they're nerfing the base damage by 30 and 15 on the scorch damage for her E, as well as level multiplier. So looking at this nerf, it definitely helps, because Shyvana was at a spot where she was too strong in the early game for how her champion should be playing, right? She should sort of be like a Mumu, where, okay, I'm going to farm in the early game, scale up a little bit, let me hit my first, second items, and then I can really take over the game. But she was at a spot where at level 5, with maybe 1-2 component items or even just a base item, she could almost 100 to 0 a carry, which doesn't make sense, right? Like, you don't see a Mumu doing that, you don't see Jax doing that, you don't see other farming junglers doing that as well. So it's really good to see that they are taking nerf bet on her, because she really deserved to get nerfed, at least within this area. I feel is very reasonable. Tryndamere was pretty average before the crit item nerfs, and he felt weak after we swung the nerf bet. We are giving him a little something more to rage about. HP percent AD 0.2 to 0.35, 0.25 to 0.4. Right? Alt Undying Rage 100 to 80 to 100 to 70 cooldown. I think it doesn't matter, right, regarding how much they buff Tryndamere here, because the reason why Tryndamere was average before the crit item nerfs was because people were still figuring out how to play the game, right? Now we are at a state where player progression and player level is getting faster, right? People are understanding, okay, if I play against Olaf, if I play against Tryndamere, I shouldn't be pushing into them. I shouldn't be playing near their tower, because if I'm near the tower, I can't run anywhere, right? They will get to chase me through the whole lane. And because it's Wild Rift, it's not League PC, the lane is a lot shorter, so it makes it so much easier for people that understand how to play against Tryndamere to just set up a freeze, play on their side, not allow Tryndamere to snowball. And the only way he can do anything is if he dives, right, where it's too risky, because if you're playing against a lot of CC, or if you get outplayed and suddenly the lane it feels so lost. So I think this change, sure, it's nice for Tryndamere players, but it doesn't change the state or the issues that Tryndamere has. Right, Twisted Fate. We've heard feedback from TF players that his deck takes a little too long to search through, and we are making his cards rotate quicker. I think this is really good, right? Rotating the cards on second skill much faster. There were people that also commented on this, and when I playtested some TF, it also felt a bit slow Although I'm not sure how much the 0.1 second would make, but it's good to see that they are implementing it based on community feedback, right? Rather than just, oh, I think this is OP, let's nerf it. Mana adjustments. We have been feeling that mana costs in the early game are a bit too generous for the majority of the champion roster. Agreeable, which has led to some very low consequence early game decision making. Yes, for sure. We are also taking time to do some ultimate mana cost standardization while we are at it. This is absolutely useless, but okay. So the main thing to note here is that they are not touching the base mana pool, right? What they're nerfing here is the mana regen. So rather than talk about how many times my mana pool can cast this spell, it's more like how many times can I cast this spell within this time frame, right? Because we want to calculate how much mana regen we can get and how this 3 mana regen would really affect some champions. The first thing that I wanted to note is the champions that really lose out from here, right? First would be Ashe. I really feel that Ashe shouldn't be on this list because ever since they nerfed her volley, which is her second skill, she becomes very weak in the laning phase. Like she's forced to use mana to sustain in the lane, to even match like champions like Ezreal, who should not be able to push the lane right against Ashe. So I find it very odd that they are nerfing Ashe, especially when she's this weak in the AD carry meta. Like she should be the champion that people go to sort of counter Jhin, right, which is the apex in the current meta. But she's so weak and she's getting a mana regen nerf, and even with mana flow ban, she just feels so bad to play. Right. Second would be Ezreal. So Ezreal is pretty interesting because you can see the nerf is huge. Like this is the biggest mana regen nerf in this whole list, right? So there is a big difference, and I'll explain why, right? Because you can say that honestly it also doesn't matter, right? Because once Ezreal gets tier, then you suddenly realize that mana is not an issue anymore. But before he gets tier, right, is when this really affects. Because first of all, right, Ezreal is seen as a very safe champion that can hold his lane by just spamming skills, right? He spams his first skill to clear the wave, spends his third skill to dodge skill shots. So every time you're playing Blitzcrank or Alistar and you use a combo or you use a hook, you're burning like maybe 20-30 mana that Ezreal could have gotten back, but is now lost, right? So in the early game, especially level 1 to 5 or before his first base, it makes it so much easier for you to either force him on a bad recall, right, or put him in a position where he's in a very awkward mana pool, right? He can't take any more trades, or he has to play really safe. Yeah, or you can just make him run out of mana and dive him afterwards. So I really like this nerf, in particular because I think Ezreal, especially in solo queue, has been showing too much like consistency. At least this gives a bit of leeway for people to sort of create an advantage against him if they know how to. Right. The third thing here is Jhin. I really like that they nerf Jhin's mana regen, but I feel that they should definitely have gone on this like way harder because first of all, this champion is using all 3 of his spells and not losing any mana when clearing waves. So they definitely should have taken this down like maybe an extra 2 or 3 more, because he's too reliable in clearing waves and isn't punished for it with any like mana cost or whatever. And Jhin doesn't even need to take mana flow ban, whereas champions like Ashe need to. Like that doesn't make sense, right? So there should have definitely been bigger nerf on Jhin. Now the second biggest mana regen nerf was Soraka, right? Nerfed by 6 mana. I think it makes sense because Soraka was in the same situation as Jhin, where she was just spamming her first and third skill and she wasn't feeling anything because I don't know, she just had infinite mana regen, I guess, or like infinite mana. So this definitely takes it down a notch. And I mean, it's good to see that not every champion was nerfed equally and they paid attention to certain areas. Although they definitely should have nerfed other champions like Jhin. I would say this is a bit odd because like taking this mana nerf, although it makes mana itself a more valuable resource, um, it doesn't really help champions or enchanter supports, right? Which I would prefer that they would be pushing for, right? Because it nerfs champions like Lux, which is one of the better enchanter supports, right? Even Janna here, or even champions like Nami, right? These, like Lux and Nami in particular, are champions that have very heavy mana reliance because they want to be spamming spells, they want to be poking a lot, healing, shielding. So this nerf really affects their viability. Obviously not by a lot because they are not the only champions getting nerfed, but it's not the best situation, right? So TF getting buffed in mana cost. These two champions don't matter regarding mana cost because they don't, they're not mana hungry champions anyway. So now taking a look at items, first is Grievous Wounds, right? Bramble Vest, they're just standardizing Bramble Vest and Thornmail and Mortal Reminder to all be 3 seconds. I think this is really good. It at least makes Bramble Vest more valuable on champions, on tanks at least, because there are cases where you buy Bramble Vest into champions like Fiora and you realize like, okay, for some reason this Grievous Wound shit is not doing anything, or like it just doesn't do as much as it should have, right? But I think this is just like a quality of life change for tanks. You can see that they are touching on tank items here as well. So let's just move on. Tank items. Stuns feel extra long on Wild Rift, and Merc Threats are being outclassed by other boots upgrade. Hopefully, a small upgrade on this option's tenacity will make them more appealing. So the reason why that Merc Threats is not like a tier 1 option is because QSS exists, right? And QSS is so cheap, whereas in the actual League PC, QSS is an item that costs 1.3k, right? Like you will not spend that amount in Wild Rift for a QSS, but because it only costs like 500 gold, then why buy Merc Threats, right? If you're playing a carry and they have like a Mumu, Ari, Ashe, then just buy QSS, there's no need for tenacity. You could even just buy Ionian Boots, extra ability haste, or extra Omnivamp with the other. So I don't think this will incentivize more people to buy it, but I guess it's good for tanks or for bruiser champions that are already intending to buy it, because most champions that buy Merc Threats are usually just tanks or supports that they don't have access to QSS, because Locket is just such a strong enchantment at the moment, and it's really surprising to see that it didn't get nerfed. But because Locket is so OP, then sure, I'll just buy Merc Threats anyway. I think this is just a little bit value adding. Doesn't change much about the item, right? People that are gonna buy it are still gonna buy it. Ninja Tabi. These changes should help champions deal with heavy auto attacking marksmen. Armor 10 to 15, auto attack damage reduction 10% to 15%. Now this is really good because of the state of the game, right? Where people are playing around the bot side more and snowballing carries or marksmen specifically to really take over the game, right? An example is like Jhin, Ezreal, right? We've even seen a little bit of Kai'Sa. So I think this is particularly good against Jhin, where you really need Ninja Tabi to stop his damage, because like they even mentioned, I think above, right? They are saying that tanks feeling weak, right, and making adjustments to both tank and anti-tank items. So I think tanks definitely feel weak in Wild Rift, because you are building full tank and for some reason this guy is still taking like half your HP with like 4 auto attacks or something. So this definitely helps a lot. It definitely helps supports as well. You should probably be buying this on every support now, just because of how strong it is in the 2v2, right? Gargoyle Enchant. Relative to other enchants, Gargoyle was very weak and wasn't worth buying on tanks. We are significantly powering it up. Now 40 to 100% to 65 and 130%. Now this is pretty insane, because not only is the number like drastically higher, it makes it so much more valuable, right? I still think Locket is going to be the go-to enchantment, but there are going to be more cases where you feel like, oh, maybe Gargoyle is just a lot better, right? Because if, let's just say you are the sole engager on the team, right? You are playing Shyvana, everybody else on your team is kind of squishy, maybe instead of buying Locket, you go Gargoyle. So that when you go in, you Gargoyle with 5 people around you, you're going to have an insane amount of HP, right? Compared to like the 200 HP shield that you would have with Locket. So this is definitely a change that I really like, because you're dissuading people from buying like the really, really OP enchantment and giving small options that in niche situations would be better than that go-to meta item. Fimbulwinter. So Fimbulwinter is a new Tear of the Goddess item that's very strong on specific tanks. We are nerfing it so those tanks aren't permanently shielded. So the very first thing, oh yeah, so passive cooldown 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Right, so the first thing that I thought about is that what champions really abuse this, right? So things that came to mind, Amumu, Gragas, maybe Blitzcrank, and Alistar, right? Because their combos and abilities all sync with this 10-second cooldown. The thing here is that this item was never OP, because I've never seen this item do well in a game or be so valuable in a game that I'm like, oh shit, this item is so broken, I need to get rid of this item, right? Because the shield is like 150 plus 5% of current mana. So is it really that OP? Like maybe if you have like 5,000 mana, you're buying Iceborne, you're buying Abyssal Mask, maybe you're even buying Rod of Ages, you know, you're buying all the mana items in the game, buying Zeeks, and you buy this, you have like 5k mana, your shield is like an insane amount, but if it's not that, then I think it doesn't matter, because you're just shielding for like 200 HP every 10 seconds, right? And this item is considered really worthless because most of its cost efficiency comes from mana. So unless you're playing like a champion that scales with mana, you're going to be suffering a lot with the amount of base stats that you get. So it's very weird to see them beat down on an item, especially by this much, right? For something that, you know, didn't really seem that strong. Game systems ability haste. So with the change to ability haste, it is something that I will go through separately from this video, because I think this change is too big to bring on its own, right? To talk about how it will impact the game. But as a short TLDR, because ability haste changed from CDR, now there's no more 40% CDR cap, and because it works the same as armor or magic resist, where it is going to be weaker the more you buy, it makes it easier to balance, and it also makes champions that, you know, built CDR in the past like stray away from that, right? There are still going to be champions that want to achieve a high level of CDR, but you know, most champions can now just build damage without feeling like, oh, my build is inefficient. Because previously what you would think is that if my build can incorporate the most amount of CDR possible, it would be the best, right? It was the same for mages, where you would buy Ionian Boots in Wild Rift just because it would give you the extra 10% that you needed to hit the cap. So definitely the extra ability haste on the boots now is very important, but there is going to be a very big change in terms of what is the priority for certain champions, right? Maybe when you're playing Orianna or you're playing some mages or assassins, you don't need that 40%, right? You can focus more on damage items that give you a bigger spike, right? But we'll cover more of that in a separate video. So dragons, we want taking dragons to be impactful, and eventually Wild Rift will adopt the Dragon Soul system in the future. These changes are the first step towards that. So regardless of Dragon Soul system, right, because not everybody might have played League, but let's just focus on the changes that they're bringing. So base burn damage, 50 true damage per second over 3 seconds to 45 true damage per second over 3 seconds, right? 150 total to 135 total. So this is a relatively small nerf. Burn damage per dragon now scales from 45 to 90 per 1, 2, 3, 4 dragons your team has taken, including Elder Dragon itself, to a total of 135 to 270 damage over 3 seconds. So the Elder Dragon elemental effect now increases by 50% per dragon taken following this calculation. Now I really love this change, because not only does it reward good play, it also rewards strong macro game, right? Teams that prioritize dragons and objectives and know how to take control of the map, know how to set up, they are going to be rewarded with a lot and much stronger buff in the Elder Dragon, because previously when you looked at Elder, you were just saying, okay, it's permanent, sure, but it doesn't feel game changing. It doesn't feel like I can take it and I know I won the game or I won half of the game, because there are a lot of cases where you will look at Baron and be like, oh, I actually prefer much prefer Baron over Elder, which now in this case, maybe you might be thinking, if I have 3 dragons, maybe Elder is the go-to option for me instead of Baron. And if you were the enemy team, you could be thinking, okay, maybe we shouldn't be trading Baron with them, because 3 dragons Elder is really OP, right? So this really good change that I think will shake a little bit of the competitive scene and the priority in terms of AD carries or terms of bot side control, because right, Dragon is on the bot side. So this is really good change. I like it. Smite. Jungler sometimes hits level 5 before laners, so we want to delay jungle speeds a bit. This should also relieve some pressure on the jungler to use Smite before their first camp reaches the spell executes range. This is really good, because mentioning about how they sometimes hit level 5 before laners, this is really cancerous to play against. Like, if both junglers just farm it out, I'm just going to be level 4, and there's going to be like level 5 Shyvana, Amumu, Lee Sin, whatever, like in my lane, and I cannot do anything, right? Because for some reason, they can get level 5 before laners, and if they are playing a very impactful champion, like Vi, for example, where it's just undodgeable, right? Like, you can't do anything, then what's the counterplay? Like, you are just one skill down, right? It's like as if they have an extra summoner spell. So I think this is a really good change that makes it more fair for sure. At least for laners playing against junglers. Runes. Fleet footwork. Fleet is appropriately powerful in PvP situations, but the amount of sustain it was providing for safer ranged champions felt too strong, for sure. Particularly in the early game. That's right. We are taking a lesson we learned from League PC and adding a constraint so that the ranged laners don't get to ignore poke completely by taking fleet footwork. Healing effectiveness against minions. The healing effectiveness for ranged champions is reduced to 30%. Now this is huge, and I mean like really, really big, because especially in the bot lane, right, there are a lot of cases where you want to be poking them, like hard shoving into their tower, poking them, making them low, and then making sure that they cannot sustain in the lane. But Fleet was just so consistent, especially on champions like Jhin, Jinx, or like I guess champions other than Ezreal, right? Or even certain situations, Ezreal will be taking Fleet, right, against double poke. So it was just so unfair, because you would be playing a poke champion, you throw a spell, 10 seconds later the guy is like almost full HP. Like, how did this happen? It shouldn't be the case. And this really ties into nerfing a really strong AD carry at the moment, which is Jhin, as well as buffing Enchanter supports, right? Because Enchanter supports are meant to poke in the early game. So if you poke them and their sustain is much lower because of this, now you become a lot more viable and a lot more impactful in the lane, compared to the previous patch. Right, so this is the end of all the changes, right? Other notes, I think these are all just quality of life changes. Improve matchmaking, limit gifts sent in a day, lower AFK penalty timings. This is really useful, really good. Chat settings are now off. I guess less toxicity for early game. I mean, for players that just started the game. And emote now glow. Okay, cool. So the big thing here is that in this patch, it's the very first like huge patch notes that we have gotten, and I'm really happy because there are a lot of areas that they're touching on which really makes sense, right? The fleet forward change or nerf, the smite nerf, as well as the dragon's buff, right? It really makes a lot of difference and makes a lot of sense that they're trying to push the game to be more competitive and open up viability in at least the support role, for example, right? As well as the nerf on Shyvana, buffing Janna, right? Mana regen changes as well. I think it's a bit odd, but we'll see how it changes, because I would agree mana was too like negligible, right? You would just be like, oh, who the fuck cares about mana, right? So these are all changes that I'm really happy with. I don't really think a Tryndamere change will add too much. Alistar change doesn't add too much as well. The only thing I'm really questioning is why did they buff Gragas when he's already OP, right? Everything else is really good for me. Right, so thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this patch rundown and look forward to more content like this in the future. Give me any suggestions if you have any questions or anything that I should be talking about in the future. Right.